Hi, Marcia. My name is Ellen, and I'll be correcting this essay for you today, this set of essays, rather. I understand that your exam is tomorrow, so let's get this to you as quickly as possible so that you have time to kind of process all the information, and hopefully we can give you some tips and some advice to be prepared well for tomorrow. All right, so we've got 2014 world food consumption. There are several different types of foods mentioned. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let's see what you wrote. The pie chart above shows the distribution of the types of food consumed on a global scale during 2014. The 7 food categories included in the chart are, okay, and you name them, that's smart, that's a very good thing to do. The most consumed type of food worldwide is meat, which makes up for almost a third of all food eaten. Okay, good. The second food group is fish, making up, check this out. It's not makes up for, but it's making, which makes up almost a third. And then here again, making up 27.9% of food consumption. On the other hand, the smallest category is rice with as little as 2.5%. Careful with your typing. Fruits and vegetables account for roughly 10% each, leaving cereals and bread with 11.7 and 5.5 respectively. Okay. It is clearly seen that over half of all food eaten globally is animal-based, i.e. all kinds of meats including fish. Cereals as a food group, including rice and bread, account for almost 20% of the modern human diet, as do fruits and vegetables. Okay, so I thought this was very nice. I thought the language you used was excellent. It's a nice high level. I was a little concerned here because you used the same expression, in like one sentence right after the other. So that concerned me. But you kind of made up for it because the rest of the language was rather nice. So yeah, I would have liked some different vocabulary here. You could have said which accounts for. I don't think, yeah, you said accounts for here. But there are different vocabulary words you could have used to do this same sort of function. So that's one little thing. Another thing here, now I want to be understood here. I'm looking at details, okay? Because on the whole, I thought this was really nicely done. But as I suspect you probably need a very good score, I want to give you some tips on how to, possibly get the best score you can. So here, we don't use on the other hand unless we have already used on the one hand. These are a set of linkers that go together, and you're really not supposed to use one without the other. Okay, so a good thing to have used here instead of on the other hand is in contrast, and that's a great catch-all. So I would have definitely used that instead, or you could have used however. I like the way you organized all of this, but let me tell you what the problem is. And this for me is probably the biggest problem. You see, this isn't really an overview. It kind of is. I mean, here it's an overview. All right. So if you had stopped here, then an examiner would say, yes, that's an overview. It gives us kind of this general sense of the main trend of the most important thing happening in this graph. But it stops being an overview when you start getting into data. You see, an overview is never supposed to have data. It's supposed to give like a general sense, but not provide any figures. So once you start giving figures, it feels like a detailed paragraph. And then check out what the result of that is. Then the examiner says, okay, well, so this isn't an overview. This is an additional detail paragraph. So then you have an answer that doesn't have an overview. And without an overview, you cannot get a 6. So you're pretty much topping out at a 5 for task achievement. You definitely don't want that. So there are several easy fixes here. IELTS doesn't need a conclusion, but you can still use one. All right, so that would have been a nice thing to do. So this would have made a very nice conclusion, And then here, right after this introduction, you could have had something else as an overview. So, what would a good overview have been? For me, a good overview would have been that meat was the most widely consumed food, while rice was the least. And that's it. That's it. That's an overview right there. You're telling me the most obvious thing, the thing that really sticks out. You could see there's no data there. Okay. And then that's an overview. And then this would have been absolutely wonderful as a conclusion. Okay. Another thing that would have been nice. Now, here's the thing, Marcia. You had some nice vocabulary, some nice grammar. You had a nice variety of language in this answer. But this is one of those challenging task ones because you really don't have a lot of information to work with. I mean, you only have 7 pieces of data, and so it's very hard to extend and get to that 150 recommended word minimum. So what you could have done is you could have maybe done a little more in terms of math and equations. I know it might seem strange because you're thinking, well, it's a language exam. Why am I doing math? But what you do when you do that is you make connections between some of the data, and that makes some of it more meaningful. So what do I mean? Let's see. Let me show you a couple of examples here. See how these figures relate to each other. So for example, this figure for bread is half of what the next most eaten food is, vegetables or fruit. Okay? So you could have said when you talked about bread, you could have said, right, like you did it a little differently. You grouped cereals and bread together. You didn't have to. And another thing that I want to tell you is that when you have so few pieces of data, it doesn't really serve you to group. Grouping is really helpful when you have a lot of data and you're trying to kind of edit, you're trying to, kind of economize in your words. So there, grouping is really important. Here, it's in your best interest to kind of stretch things out a little more. So one thing that you could have done is you could have talked about, like I said here, if you had mentioned vegetables and fruit, you could have said the next most eaten food group was bread with only 5%, which is half of the figure for vegetables and fruit. So something like that would have been good. Or, you could have also done the same thing for rice. You could have said that rice, the least most popular food group, was less than half of the next most popular food group, bread. So those are the kind of connections that are helpful here. And it making those kinds of comparisons makes the data a little more meaningful. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have a mechanical report of the data. And what I mean by that is meat was most popular with 31.4%. Following that was fish with 27.9%. In third place was cereals with 11.7%, followed by vegetables and fruits with approximately 10.5% each. That's mechanical. There's no comparison here. There's no analysis. It's just literally giving a list. So you don't want to do that. And because a lot of students do that, making these comparisons between the data is one way to avoid this. It shows analysis. It shows some critical thinking. Okay, so as I said, the advice that I'm giving you for this task one is to really take your task one from being a good task one to becoming a really good task one that's definitely going to get you into one of those higher band scores. So that's what this is about. And of course, that requires looking at some details. Okay, so that's a lot of information about your task one. Let's take a look now at your task 2 on international marketing. All right, you're supposed to discuss both views, give your opinion, so let's see what you said. Some people argue that international marketing campaigns, without that E, are necessary and cheap educational tools that help spread ideas, language, and culture across the globe. Others believe that they are intrusive and invasive ways of indoctrination. Do you mean indoctrination? I want to double check this word here. This essay will discuss both perspectives, but it is my opinion that the latter is true. Okay. You definitely ran some risks here. I don't mind what you did, but like I said, it was a little risky. Let me tell you why. Because first of all, you copied some of the language of the task. What do I mean? Let me show you. Hold on. Okay, so it says invasive and intrusion. You wrote intrusive and invasive. It's like identical. Just because you changed the word order around and you said you used an adjective instead of a noun, it's still, you're copying language from the prompt. And then here, spread ideas, language, and culture. Well, ideas, language, and culture. So it's identical to what's in the task. You definitely don't want to do that. First of all, it makes a bad impression. Okay. Second of all, it takes away from your word count. Now, the word count doesn't really matter anymore, but you still need to be careful about using language that is not your own. It definitely does not bode well for you if you do that. Okay, then here you said this essay will discuss both perspectives, but it is my opinion that the latter is true. Using the former and the latter is something I find that a lot of students have a problem with. They often use it incorrectly. I can't totally say that you used it perfectly, but it was okay. In other words, it was one of those things that I let slide. It was fine. So I understood what you meant by the latter. So it's just, you want to be careful with it. So what I want to recommend is, if you have time, which I know is difficult because your exam is tomorrow, but assuming you did have time, I would recommend looking up rules about how to use the former and the latter, because it's a little more specific than most students think. All right, but other than that, it's fine. So let's move on. On the one hand, international advertising is one of the best and cheapest ways to divulge ideas, language, and culture on a global scale. According to a group of behavioral experts from the University of Oxford, advertising is one of the main sources of information and social conditioning a modern human being is exposed to. That is to say, that whenever a person is in contact with some form of a marketing tool, he or she is learning not only about the product being sold, but about the social context and social behaviors in which it is acceptable to own and use that product. This is a very effective and cheap way of educating the population on a large scale without having to adapt it to every language or culture. Wow, there's some wonderful vocabulary here. Really, really great collocations, high level, precise, so super. Um, my question is how on topic is this? So let's look at some of the vocabulary that was good. You talked about social conditioning. Modern human is exposed to, in contact with some form of marketing, social context, social behaviors, a large scale. So all of that was really lovely and really precise. The thing here is, like I said, the thing is that did you answer this idea about it spreading ideas, language, and culture? Well, yes, to ideas. There's no question about that. Um, but I don't know. Let me see. I kind of felt like this wasn't really about international marketing, but just marketing in general. So it didn't really capture this idea of, you know, an ad or a product from one company being from one country being incorporated and maybe even changed to be advertised in another country. I didn't really get that. And then what kinds of things that advertisement can teach the host population, or even the country of production. So I didn't really get all of that. I felt like this was a little general in terms of marketing and advertising on the whole, and not really specific to international marketing, which is a whole other can of worms. So I would have liked a little more relevant information. That again is something that would have taken you to a really higher band score as far as this paragraph is concerned. Let's take a look at the second body paragraph. On the other hand, international marketing can be intrusive and invasive to the country in question. Now, this is lifted straight from the prompt, Marcia. You don't want to do this. You really want to, use some novel language, some of your own language. There are other words you could have used. There's, millions of words. So, definitely you want to rephrase that. It is very well known that propaganda can be used to destroy local cultures and heritages. Recent articles about the loss of cultural diversity around the world state that due to the aggressiveness of international marketing and the imposition of imperialistic customs without that E and values, many parts of the world have seen a 50% reduction of the local culture and customs. In other words, the marketing industry is responsible for the current global and standardized culture. Okay. All right, let's move on from that. I don't want to talk about anything specific right now. I want to think about that a little bit. Let's look at your conclusion. To conclude, it is my opinion that allowing international marketing to take over a country's education, way of thinking, language, and culture is deeply detrimental to the human species as a whole. Even though it is a cheap way to spread ideas and values, it should not replace the traditional forms of imparting knowledge. Okay, a great conclusion. I just want to make sure that it is what you were saying, invasive and intrusive. You said the latter is true. So here you talked about the positives, here you talked about the negatives. So that's perfect. Yeah, I don't really have anything to comment on that. Okay, GME, huh? So, yes, so I thought you did a really great job. As I said, there was some concern that it wasn't entirely about international marketing. This paragraph specifically felt more about just marketing in general and not international. Here I was okay. Let me think about this for 1 second. It is an invasion and intrusion into the country in question. All right, now since you're trying to register for medical registration in the UK, that means you need a 7. So I think that this is a very good attempt. I think you would do well. I think you will do well tomorrow. If for any reason, if something goes wrong tomorrow and you needed to reset the exam, then one thing that I would like to recommend is maybe developing all of this a little more. I would have to say this is a pretty textbook treatment of this essay. I think you did a really good job. You were definitely on topic. You used great vocabulary. So it's very, very good. I would love to hear how you do on your exam tomorrow. I really want to know because I do think this is a very well constructed essay. So my general feeling is that you're not going to have a problem. Having said that, I also do want you to take the suggestions in this video correction. I want you to, as much as possible, apply some of the things that I mentioned here today. And like I said, I really want to hear how you do, both tomorrow after the exam and, of course, once you get your results. So to get a 7, as you probably know, means you need to get all across the board in writing, all 7s. So you need to get 7s throughout task 1 and all 7s on task 2. If you get even 1 6, it's going to drop your score to a 6.5. And so for that reason, I typically recommend to students that they have as a goal shooting for an 8 somewhere. Okay. So if your vocabulary is really strong, then, definitely work on that so you can potentially get an 8 for vocabulary. If grammar is your strength, then, really try to show off some advanced grammatical structures and a wide range of structures. So like I said, each person when they get to this kind of level has different strengths. So play to your strengths. And if you think that there's somewhere where you could possibly get an 8, then definitely, definitely try to play up that strength. One area where I would like to see this maybe a little stronger, as I said, is in task achievement. Maybe you could have set just a little more, maybe looked at a little more in depth. But as I said, for a band 7, I think you'd be fine. So do tell us how it goes, and I definitely want to hear your results. I'm really curious. I thought you did really well. If you have any questions about this or any comments about this video correction, let me know. Just shoot us an email, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay? So, best of luck to you tomorrow. I think you're going to do great. So, feel good, feel confident, and let us know how you do. Good luck.